Here we are just on the edge of the church's lawn, and you can see plenty of lovely green grass, some assorted kinds of clovers, and also you might see tucked around there little white flowers that kind of look like trumpets. Those are called field bindweed, and they are, as the name suggests, considered a weed. They will grow in the midst of the grass. They are sort of peppering all of the churchyard, and yet the grass seems to be doing just fine. The bindweed isn't killing off the grass. It's just, if you're the sort of purist who only wants grass in your yard, it might seem like a blemish. Or you could say, as we basically do here at the church, it's not hurting anything. It's not causing a problem. It's not killing the grass. We can leave these side by side for a while. I guess there's differences of philosophy. There are some who, the moment they see something that looks like a weed, they want to pull it out of almost personal pride. They don't want to let anybody see them having anything but an immaculate lawn, and anything that isn't intentional needs to be rooted out and gotten rid of. Others who would say, you know what, if it's not hurting anything, if it's not going to kill off the plants I want, it's fine to leave side by side. Imagine, though, we're talking about not just your grass that's basically decorative, but your own fields that you are growing, say, wheat in, that's going to feed your family or be sold to market that you can provide for your family. And imagine that everybody else in the neighborhood can see the produce growing up in your field. You might be a little more protective about whether you do or don't let weeds grow up in your yard. It's the sort of setting for a story we're going to hear this coming Sunday from Jesus. After the story we heard this past Sunday that imagined God like a farmer scattering seed that lands on different kinds of soil, and how God is willing to risk it anyway for the hope of where there will be a harvest, Jesus tells another curious story about what God's reign is like and how it's different from what we expect from other kingdoms and empires. So he imagines a story where there's a farmer who's planted good seed in his field, and then an enemy comes along at night and plants weeds amidst the good seed in the ground. And when it comes up, you get the good plant, the wheat, and well as this sort of these weeds is darnel, is the plant that's coming up alongside it. And the servants of the guy who owns the field, I said, you want us to pull up all these weeds? This is going to be so embarrassing. Everybody will be just scandalized that you're letting weeds grow alongside your good wheat. Oh my goodness, what an embarrassment. And the farmer says, no, leave it side by side. We can take care of it at harvest time. I don't want you to pull up a single one of the good wheat in the attempt to root out the bad weeds. So they grow up side by side, and then comes harvest time. And then when harvest time comes, presumably the farmer can have his farm workers sort out the good wheat from the bad weeds, and the bad weeds will turn out to be kindling in the fire anyway. They will turn out to be useful after all. So even what the enemy intended to do as wickedness, turns out to be useful for the farmer in the first place. It's a curious story Jesus tells, but maybe the hang-up we find ourselves having first off is that God doesn't seem to get upset, at least the way Jesus tells it, at impurities and weeds growing alongside God's good field. That God's willing to leave things side by side because God doesn't want to lose a single one of the good things in the field. God doesn't want any one of them to be accidentally uprooted or yanked out of the soil in the attempt to legislate or force out or rid out all the bad weeds along the way. In other words, God's kingdom, God's reign, God's way of running the universe is maybe not what we expect. We tend to have this picture that God wants to get rid of anything impure, all bad things, out they go right away, immediate zapping. And Jesus seems to think that's not how God runs the world, that God is so concerned about saving and preserving what's good, that God is willing to look foolish in leaving the weeds to grow side by side with the wheat, rather than root out the weeds and then end up killing or destroying something good along the way. In some ways, it's a way of making sense of the whole world we live in. We often find ourselves asking, why does God let terrible things happen in the world? Why doesn't God stop all the bad things in the world? Why doesn't God prevent people from doing terrible things, robbing banks or setting fires or things like that? And part of Jesus' answer seems to be, if God's going to zap every source of evil and bad, that's going to also destroy a bunch of good things as well. God would prefer to love the world even for all of its mixedness, the good and the bad side by side, than risk destroying whatever is good that God wants to hold on to and preserve. There is something good and beautiful and worthy in the world that God does not want to lose, and that God is committed, even at the risk of looking foolish, to hold on to and save and preserve what's good. That's our mission in the world. You and I are not sent out to identify evildoers and sinners and zap them and to say, in God's name, we need to get rid of you. You're bad, you're bad, you're bad. That is constantly the temptation of religious people, isn't it? To imagine God has deputized us to zap and smite the people we don't think are worthy. And instead, Jesus would have us, if we imagine that we're like the farmhands in the story, to trust that the manager of the farm knows what he's doing. And if he says to wait, we'll wait. To let the harvest come in its own time. Because God is more interested in saving what is good than destroying what's bad. You may have heard me say this before. I can't help but quote a Star Wars line when I find one. There's this great line I love from the 8th Star Wars movie where near the end, the one character says, "That's how we'll win. Not fighting what we hate, but saving what we love." In so many ways, that's what Jesus says is the way God runs the universe. Not instantly zapping the things that are evil or bad or weeds, but saving what is worthy and good and whole, even if that means looking foolish in the meantime while the weeds grow side by side along the wheat. That's the story we're going to hear this coming Sunday as we hear another tale Jesus tells, another parable of what it looks like where God reigns. Join us this coming Sunday. See you then.